It began as a routine traffic stop on a humid August afternoon. Officer Daniel Burton was patrolling a quiet stretch of Highway 19 just outside Nashville, Tennessee. His radar gun picked up a speeding sedan only 5 miles over the limit. Perhaps he should have let it pass, but something made him flip on his lights. He expected a run-of-the-mill infraction, maybe an unpaid ticket or a broken tail light. Instead, he found a trembling young black woman with eyes full of heartbreak and determination. Little did Daniel know that by the end of this encounter, his entire life would be turned upside down. Officer Daniel Burton had worn the uniform of the Nashville Police Department for almost 10 years. He came from a modest family who admired law and order. His father was a postal worker. His mother taught 3rd grade. They had raised Daniel to respect people of all backgrounds. But as he grew older and entered law enforcement, some of his colleagues had a different perspective. Over time, the cynicism of the job, the stereotypes perpetuated by certain corners of policing, and the daily stress began to chip away at Daniel's optimism. He wasn't overtly hateful. He simply found himself more and more often jumping to conclusions about people, especially about young black men and women, who he had been trained to see as potential threats by his toughest commanding officers. On that sweltering August day, Daniel sat in his patrol car just off the shoulder of Highway 19. He usually didn't bother with such minor speeding violations, but something about that beat-up silver Toyota Camry caught his eye. Maybe it was the cracked bumper. Maybe it was the out-of-state license plate from Ohio. Whatever it was, Daniel flicked on the lights and eased out behind the car. When the driver pulled over obediently, Daniel felt a small flicker of curiosity. As he approached, he noticed the driver's side window was already down, and behind the steering wheel sat a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, gripping it until her knuckles went white. She was black, with tight braids that fell to her shoulders. A small crucifix pendant dangled around her neck, reflecting the scorching sun's glare. "License and registration," Daniel said, his tone a bit too authoritative, the way he'd been taught at the academy. His mouth felt dry, and the heat pressing in from all sides only intensified his tension. The woman swallowed hard. Her voice quavered as she answered, "Yes, officer," while rummaging through the glove box. Finding the registration took her an extra few seconds as papers spilled onto the passenger seat. She handed him the requested documents, eyes darting between his face and the asphalt. Daniel had pulled over countless drivers, but something about her fear unsettled him. Usually he found it annoying when motorists acted nervous. They were, after all, just reaping the consequences of breaking the law, or so he thought. But this time he couldn't shake a sense of guilt. Perhaps the old him, the wide-eyed rookie who believed in fairness and empathy, was trying to resurface. "Ma'am," he began, glancing at the license. "Natalie Williams?" She nodded. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" She opened her mouth, but her words stuttered out. I might have been speeding, officer. I didn't realize how fast I was going." Her voice was breathy, almost brittle. It was as if she carried the weight of more than a mere traffic stop on her shoulders. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to maintain composure. "Clocked you going 5 miles over. That's usually not a big deal. You in a hurry?" Natalie's lips parted. She hesitated, and then tears pooled in her eyes. Daniel leaned in, suddenly concerned. This was not the typical reaction to a slight overspeeding. She took a moment to gather herself. "I'm trying to get to Vanderbilt University Medical Center before it's too late." She said it with a kind of hushed desperation, as if her entire life depended on being believed. Now, Daniel wasn't a monster. The mention of a medical center carried weight. Vanderbilt was a reputable hospital in Nashville. He knew people came from all across the region for specialized treatments. He repeated her words silently, trying to piece together the subtext. "You have an emergency," he ventured. Natalie's tear-streaked cheeks answered for her. Yes, she whispered, voice trembling. My brother's in the ICU. They said if I don't get there. She swallowed again. I might not see him in time. At first, Daniel's heart softened. Family emergencies were something that resonated with him. He had lost an aunt to leukemia 2 years ago. He remembered driving to the hospital in a panic, praying to make it before she was gone. But before he could respond with sympathy, the old skeptic in him reared up, that ingrained suspicion from countless traffic stops where drivers wove tales to avoid tickets. Can you show me any documentation? He asked, half regretting the words as soon as they left his lips. Natalie flinched as though slapped. She paused for a moment before she opened her phone. Daniel watched, uncertain whether to stop her. She scrolled through her messages. Her hands were shaking, so it took her a moment to find what she needed. Then she held up the screen. On it was a text message thread, an older woman's name, presumably her mother, and lines of text reading, "Your brother's not doing good. Doctors said you need to come now. ICU, we love you." The timestamps were recent, just this morning. The mention of ICU was repeated. Daniel's heart squeezed. A flicker of shame passed through him. He stepped back from the window, inhaling the thick summer air. All right, he said, feeling the weight of conflict inside him. You're only going 5 over. Normally I'd just give a warning. Let me just run your license through, and you can be on your way. He walked back to his cruiser, trying to maintain an air of professionalism, but his conscience nagged at him. Something about Natalie's raw fear and sorrow was so palpable. Sitting down in the patrol car, he ran her license. No priors, no warrants. He noticed that her insurance had lapsed briefly, but was renewed a month prior. Nothing unusual. While waiting for the database to confirm, Daniel stared at the rear-view mirror. Natalie's Camry was old, battered, with a seat full of what looked like her life's possessions. Possibly she'd driven all night from Ohio. He exhaled. The system returned her information with no issues. He stepped out, ready to hand back her ID and let her go. But as he approached, he saw her head slumped forward, her shoulders trembling in silent sobs. It was a heartbreakingly private moment, captured in the little bubble of that worn-out sedan. "Ma'am," he said gently, startling her as he tapped the frame of the open window. She looked up, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry," she managed. I haven't slept. I drove here from Toledo straight through, and her voice trailed off, lost in tears. Daniel felt the dryness in his throat. The tension he'd carried all day, all month, all year. It felt ridiculous now. He forced a soft tone, something he rarely used in uniform. "Hey, it's gonna be okay. I'm giving you a warning. You can go, just be safe." Her gratitude poured out in a wave. "Thank you so much, officer." She reached for the gear shift but paused, rummaging into the passenger seat. "I know you're going to think this is crazy, but can I show you something?" He hesitated. He was on duty. He should wrap up the stop. But something made him nod. "All right," he said cautiously. Natalie lifted a glossy photograph from a file folder. "This is my brother, Marcus," she said, passing the picture to Daniel. In the photo, he saw a young man, maybe 19 or 20, tall and lanky, wearing a goofy grin and a basketball jersey that said Toledo Community College. His arms were around Natalie, both of them beaming. "He was healthy just a few months ago," she whispered. "A freak heart condition. He collapsed on the basketball court. Now he's on the donor list. They don't think he'll make it if he doesn't get a transplant soon." Daniel studied the photo. The sincerity in Natalie's face, the heartbreak in her voice. He knew it was real, all of it. Guilt twisted in his gut for ever doubting her. "I'm sorry," he said, unsure what else to offer. "I understand. Go see your brother, and drive safe." She thanked him again, and he stepped back as she merged onto the highway, her Camry disappearing in the shimmering heat waves. Daniel stood there for a few long moments, a pensive look on his face. Sometimes these brushes with raw human pain made him question the daily grind of ticket writing and petty arrests. He got back into his cruiser, exhaling. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe he should volunteer at a local youth center or sign up for hospital outreach. He thought about his father's old line, "You're not there just to arrest, son. You're there to serve." The words echoed in his mind as he navigated back onto the highway. If only everything was as simple as giving a warning and letting a grieving sister go. 3 days passed. Officer Daniel Burton didn't think he would ever see Natalie Williams again, and under normal circumstances, he wouldn't have. But sometimes fate liked to twist the threads of life in unexpected ways. On the 3rd day after that traffic stop, Daniel was assigned a routine patrol around the outskirts of Nashville. He found himself responding to a disturbance call at a local Walmart. The manager had called, complaining about a customer who collapsed in an aisle, seeming distressed or unwell, possibly on something. When Daniel arrived, he expected to find a drug overdose. Instead, he discovered something far more harrowing. Natalie Williams stood at the center of a small crowd in the Walmart's clothing section. She was trying to help a middle-aged man who'd fallen to the floor, clutching his chest. Daniel recognized her instantly, the braids, the tired eyes, the same silver crucifix. She was shouting for someone to call an ambulance. A frantic employee was kneeling beside the man, but no one seemed sure what to do. Daniel rushed over. "Hey, I'm Officer Burton with the Nashville PD," he said to the man, though his eyes flicked to Natalie. She glanced up, shock and recognition dawning simultaneously. "Officer," her voice trembled. He just collapsed. The man on the floor was still conscious, panting and struggling to breathe. Daniel quickly crouched down, pressing 2 fingers to the man's neck to check his pulse. It was racing. "Okay, sir. Hang in there," Daniel said. He looked up at an employee. "Is an ambulance on the way?" "Yes," the employee stuttered. "They said they'd be here in 10 minutes. Daniel's training for medical emergencies kicked in. "We need to keep him comfortable," he said, loosening the man's collar. "Sir, can you hear me? Are you feeling pain anywhere else?" "My chest," the man rasped. He was older, maybe in his 50s, and the strain on his face was evident. Natalie hovered nearby, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't just walk away," she murmured, almost to herself. "I saw him in trouble, and—" Daniel nodded to her, grateful for her compassion. In that tense moment, he recalled their previous meeting, the tears in her eyes over her brother, the heartbreak she carried. Now here she was, stepping up to help a stranger in crisis. Eventually, paramedics arrived and took over. The man was stabilized and carried away on a stretcher. Daniel and Natalie both watched, relief washing over them as the paramedics assured the manager they'd do everything possible. The employees and onlookers began to disperse, returning to their business. Natalie looked spent, as if the weight of the world was on her shoulders. She caught Daniel's gaze. "Officer Burton, thank you for what you did. You did all the heavy lifting," he replied. "I just helped. Are you okay? You look exhausted." She let out a shaky breath. "I am. My brother. He's still in ICU. They say his condition is critical. And my family's staying at this cheap motel near the hospital." A faint tear glimmered in the corner of her eye. "It's been 3 days, and no improvement. I came to Walmart just to buy some essentials for my mom. She paused, glancing around. "I had to check the clearance rack, 'cause I can't afford anything else right now." Daniel felt a pang of sympathy. He was trying to balance concern with professional distance, but it felt impossible. "I'm really sorry to hear that," he said quietly. "How's your family holding up?" She sniffled, forcing a small, sad smile. "We're trying, but the medical bills are." Her voice choked. "I don't know what we're gonna do. I've been applying for financial aid, but it's complicated." Something about the desperation in her eyes, the unrelenting chain of misfortune, stirred Daniel. He'd seen plenty of tragedies, victims of crime, parents losing children, but rarely was he so close to someone's private struggle. The fact that they had crossed paths twice in such a short span felt like more than coincidence. "Listen," he said, hesitating. "If there's anything you need, sometimes there are charity programs, assistance from the city. I'm not an expert, but I can check resources. The department might have leads on some non-profits that help with housing near hospitals." She looked at him gratefully. "Thank you. It means a lot." They exchanged phone numbers, more out of shared humanity than anything else. Daniel wrote down a few local charities that offered grants for medical emergencies, as well as a place of worship known for helping families in crisis. One of them was the First Baptist Church of Nashville, a real location known for its community outreach. He thought it might lend her a hand with groceries or even a small donation. As she walked away, Daniel felt a strange pang of guilt. In times past, he had turned a blind eye to the deeper struggles of people he ticketed, content with the thought that he was simply doing his job. But Natalie's heartbreak was so palpable, her situation so dire, that it made him confront the question, how many other families had he overlooked or misjudged, just because of what they looked like or where they came from? The following week passed in a blur. Daniel continued his routine shifts patrolling neighborhoods, responding to minor disturbances, filling out stacks of paperwork. But in the back of his mind, Natalie's predicament lingered. He couldn't stop thinking about her brother lying in that hospital bed and about the precarious nature of life. One evening, he found himself sitting at home, ignoring the television while scrolling through his phone. He remembered he had Natalie's number. It felt odd reaching out to someone who was basically a stranger, but he also felt a tug of concern that he couldn't suppress. "Hey, it's Officer Burton. Just wanted to check in. How's your brother doing?" He typed out a text and hit send. He didn't expect an immediate reply. It was late, and maybe she was at the hospital. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. "Thanks for asking." "He's the same. Doctors are still waiting on a possible donor. They say it's a long shot." Daniel stared at the screen, his heart heavy. "I'm really sorry to hear that. Let me know if you need anything. And let me know if I can drop off some groceries or something." He pressed send, feeling a bit awkward. Why was he offering this? He hardly knew her, but deep down he realized he was compelled by a sense of empathy he hadn't felt in years, combined with a gnawing sense of atonement. He wanted to believe that he wasn't just a cog in a flawed system, that he could actually help. Natalie's reply came soon after, surprisingly honest. "That's very kind. Thank you. We're okay for now, but I appreciate it more than you know." The text trailed off, but that simple exchange planted a seed of something in Daniel, a longing to do more than just serve and protect in the most superficial sense. He found himself daydreaming about ways to help beyond a simple bag of groceries. In a moment of impulsive optimism, he even considered seeing if the department could do a fundraiser, but he knew the bureaucracy would probably stifle such efforts. Still, the idea lingered. 2 days later, while Daniel was off duty, he got a phone call. It was nearly midnight, and he was already half asleep. The caller ID showed Natalie's name. His heart lurched. Why would she be calling at this hour? Did something happen? "Hello," he answered, sitting up in bed, alertness flooding him. Natalie's voice quivered on the other end, a mixture of hysteria and heartbreak. "Officer Burton, I'm so sorry to call you like this. I don't know who else to call." His mind raced. "Natalie? What's going on? Is it your brother?" The question tumbled out with urgency. She hiccuped a sob. "Yes. He went into cardiac arrest an hour ago. They revived him, but the doctors, they say there might not be much time left." Her words tumbled quickly, almost incoherent, as she fought tears. "My mum has to go back to Ohio tomorrow because she's run out of leave from work, and we can't afford to stay in the motel." I'm alone, Officer Burton. I'm terrified. What if something happens while I'm asleep or away from the hospital? Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He clenched his phone, heart pounding. The sense of helplessness in her voice was piercing. Natalie, calm down, he said quietly, slipping into his uniform of composure. Breathe. Where are you right now? At the hospital, she answered, voice trembling. I'm outside in the courtyard. My mom is with Marcus, but she's leaving first thing in the morning. I don't know how we're going to pay for this. The hospital bills. She broke down into sobs. Daniel swung his legs out of bed. Stay put. I'm coming, he said before he could fully think it through. What? She asked, sniffing. I'm off duty, Daniel replied, already yanking on a pair of jeans. But I'll be there in 30 minutes, all right. Just hang on. He could practically hear the relief through the phone. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel's heart throbbed with a frantic mix of urgency and confusion. Why was he, a simple patrol officer, driving to comfort a distressed young woman? He barely knew. Part of him worried he was crossing some line of professional distance. But the louder part of him insisted that this was the right thing to do, human to human. Not just officer to civilian. He drove the dark streets of Nashville, the city lights blurring past. His thoughts raced from one worry to the next. Could he offer any real help? Could he at least give her a safe place to vent her emotions? When he arrived at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, he found Natalie sitting on a bench near the main entrance, hugging her knees, eyes swollen from crying. She looked up as he approached, relief washing over her features. For a moment, she seemed too exhausted even to speak. Daniel sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. Thank you for coming, she finally managed. You're welcome, Daniel said, voice soft. How's your brother now? She shrugged, tears glistening anew. He's stable for now. They're keeping him in a medically induced coma. The transplant coordinator says it's a waiting game. She sniffled, drawing in a shaky breath. I'm scared, Officer Burton. I can't lose him. Daniel laid a tentative hand on her shoulder, a gesture of comfort. I'm so sorry, he murmured. I wish I could do more. They sat like that for a moment, the hospital's fluorescent lights casting eerie shadows across the courtyard. The beep of distant machines and the occasional overhead page drifted through the air. Then, as though bursting from the pressure of her anxieties, Natalie began talking about her childhood with Marcus, how they grew up in Toledo, how he'd been a star athlete before his heart issues were discovered. She spoke of her father, who had passed away unexpectedly, leaving her mother to raise them on a modest salary as a nursing assistant. She recounted the bright hopes Marcus once had for a basketball scholarship, how he dreamed of going pro one day. And now, all of it dangled in the balance of a failing heart. Daniel listened quietly, something stirring within him that he had long suppressed, the part of him that wanted to understand the stories behind the people he encountered, the part that recognized each name on a driver's license as a real, living person with a beating heart. Gradually her sobs subsided, replaced by the gentle hush of shared sorrow. I'm sorry, she whispered, wiping her nose. I shouldn't dump all this on you. You're not dumping, he said firmly. You're going through something terrible, and I'm just, he swallowed, I'm just trying to help in any way I can. She nodded, exhaling shakily. Thank you, really. In the following days, Daniel checked in on Natalie. He even visited the hospital a couple times to see Marcus. He learned that Marcus's condition was delicate. The doctors told them that time was running out if no donor heart was found soon. The prognosis was grim. Daniel found himself confiding in a close friend and fellow officer, Garrett Lewis. Garrett was one of the few officers in the precinct who seemed to share Daniel's empathy for people in dire straits. They spoke in hushed tones in the station's break room one evening. I can't shake this feeling, Daniel confided, like maybe I'm supposed to help her. Garrett shrugged, sipping his coffee. You can't fix everything, man. The system is bigger than us. But it's good you're there for her. Sometimes that's all we can do. Daniel sighed. I know, but I just can't stand seeing how the odds are stacked against her brother. I mean, they don't have money. They don't have connections. And time is running out. Garrett considered this. You know, he said slowly, there's a local non-profit called the Give a Heart Foundation. They work with organ transplant patients. They sometimes help pay for out-of-town lodging and assist with donor-matching resources. Might be worth a shot. Daniel perked up. Thanks, man. I'll pass that along to Natalie. A flicker of hope sparked within him. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to help. Later that week, Daniel brought up the foundation to Natalie. She jumped on the lead immediately, filling out forms, calling the organization for assistance. But bureaucracy moved slowly. Each day, her brother's condition worsened. Then, one Sunday morning, as Daniel was finishing a night shift, he got a panicked text from Natalie. Marcus just coded again. He's on life support. Doctor says we need a miracle. Daniel's chest clenched. He asked if she needed anything, but no immediate response came. The next evening, he visited the hospital, feeling apprehensive. He found Natalie in the waiting room, kneeling in prayer, tears streaming down her face. She looked up when she heard him approach. They said, his heart can't keep going without intervention. She spoke as though numb. They're talking about a mechanical heart if a donor doesn't appear. But we don't have money, and insurance won't cover everything. Daniel felt a surge of protectiveness, an ache that made him want to punch a wall in frustration. This was a person, someone's brother, someone's son, and it all came down to money and timing. As they sat together, a doctor approached, still wearing his surgical cap. Natalie? He asked, softly, as if bracing for an emotional storm. Can we talk? She stood, her face blank with dread. Daniel rose too, wondering if he should stay. Natalie silently clasped his hand, desperation shining in her eyes, and he understood that she wanted him there. The doctor led them to a private consultation room. I'm afraid we've exhausted all our immediate options, the doctor said, voice heavy. Marcus's heart is giving out. We're doing everything possible, but we need a donor heart soon. The mechanical heart might be an option, but it's expensive and there's significant risk. Natalie's tears brimmed again. She whispered, but we can't afford it. The doctor nodded sympathetically. I know. Sometimes foundations or charities can help. You should talk to the hospital's financial counselor. But time is critical. She glanced at Daniel, eyes full of despair. He found himself trembling with empathy and rage at the system's mercilessness. We'll figure something out, he said, though he didn't know how. That night, after leaving the hospital, Daniel drove aimlessly, mind racing. He found himself pulling into the parking lot of the First Baptist Church of Nashville. He hadn't set foot in a church in years. His faith was something he rarely discussed. But now he felt drawn by some intangible force. When he entered, a service had just ended. A few people lingered, chatting softly. Daniel approached the man who appeared to be the pastor and introduced himself. Pastor Leonard? Daniel asked. I'm Daniel Burton. I'm a police officer, but I'm not here on official business. Pastor Leonard greeted him warmly, though confusion flickered across his face. How can I help you, Officer Burton? Daniel inhaled, trying to keep his composure. I'm here on behalf of a young woman named Natalie Williams. Her brother's in critical need of a heart transplant at Vanderbilt. They're from out of town, and they're about to lose everything because of medical bills. I heard your church sometimes helps people in crisis. Pastor Leonard's gaze softened with compassion. We do what we can. We have a fund for local families in dire need. Let's sit down and talk. Over the next hour, Daniel poured out Natalie's story. The motel expenses, the mechanical heart, the looming threat of losing Marcus. Pastor Leonard listened attentively, then explained that their resources were limited, but they could possibly contribute toward the family's lodging and might be able to connect them with a broader church network that sometimes pooled funds for extreme medical cases. It wasn't a guaranteed solution, but it was hope. Pastor Leonard also mentioned that the church could coordinate a donation drive, collecting money from parishioners. Daniel felt tears sting his eyes, grateful that strangers would care enough to try helping Natalie and Marcus. "Thank you," Daniel said quietly. "Any help, even a little bit, could mean the world." Pastor Leonard patted his shoulder. "God works in mysterious ways, officer. Sometimes you just have to keep the faith." Daniel nodded, a lump in his throat. Faith, it was something he'd lost track of, but perhaps it was stirring within him again. A few days later, Daniel discovered that the church had raised a modest sum for Natalie's family. It wasn't enough to cover a mechanical heart, but it was something. They also arranged for her mother to extend her stay in Nashville a bit longer, paying for part of the motel bill. However, overshadowing every small victory was Marcus's ticking clock. His condition teetered between life and death. Meanwhile, Daniel found himself under scrutiny at the precinct. A few fellow officers teased him. "Hey, I hear you're some kind of social worker now," one sneered. Another joked about Daniel adopting a hospital ward. He tried to let it roll off his back, but the comments stung. He realized just how deeply some of his peers were entrenched in a callous mindset. Yet he pressed on, haunted by a feeling that if Marcus died, Natalie's life would shatter forever. And he, in some cosmic way, would have failed someone he could have helped. Then one night, Daniel got a text from Natalie. A donor heart might be available, someone from St. Thomas Hospital in Memphis. "We're waiting for confirmation. Please pray." Daniel's heart soared with cautious optimism. If this was real, it could be the miracle they needed. He typed back, "That's incredible. Keep me posted. I'm hoping for the best." For the rest of the shift, Daniel struggled to concentrate. He waited for further news, but none came. Eventually, near midnight, he texted again, "Any update?" Her reply was immediate. "They're running tests on the donor's heart. The surgeons have to make sure it's a match. Doctor says it's 50/50ths. Daniel exhaled, praying silently for that 50% chance to go in Marcus's favor. The next afternoon, Daniel visited the hospital again, brimming with nervous hope. He found Natalie pacing the corridor outside ICU. The moment she saw him, tears glistened, and she shook her head, anguish etched on her face. "It wasn't a match," she said, voice breaking. "They have to give it to someone else." Daniel felt his stomach twist. I'm so sorry," he whispered, pulling her into a supportive hug. She sobbed against his shoulder. A wave of helplessness overwhelmed him. He had truly thought this might be it. "Now the doctors say if we can't do the mechanical heart soon, he won't make it," Natalie choked. She looked up at him, eyes rimmed with red. "Officer Burton, I don't know what to do. I've prayed. I've tried everything." Daniel blinked back tears of his own, a sense of outrage flaring in his chest. This was so unfair. Marcus was young, with a life ahead of him, undone by a random twist of medical fate. Another memory flickered in Daniel's mind, the moment he'd pulled Natalie over on Highway 19. How trivial that felt, now compared to the enormity of her reality. He searched for words, but the usual platitudes felt hollow. "We'll find a way," he mumbled, though he didn't know how. For the next few hours, he stayed by Natalie's side. Her mother was there too, drained and silent, dark circles under her eyes. As the sun set beyond the hospital windows, Daniel realized that time was running out for them all. It was nearly midnight when Daniel finally left the hospital, heart heavy, mind spinning. As he walked toward his car, he felt a rush of emotion that he couldn't contain. In the empty parking lot, under the flickering fluorescent lights, he sank onto a concrete barrier and hung his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. All the frustration, all the pain he'd witnessed, the helplessness of not being able to save a young life, it surged out of him in sobs. He couldn't quite control. He thought about how he'd spent years judging people, dishing out tickets or arrests without caring about the deeper story. Had he failed as a human being, as a police officer, all this time? He stayed there, alone in the dark, tears falling onto the pavement. This was not how he pictured his life. Some part of him felt a cosmic sting, like maybe this was his karma, confronting him with the consequences of apathy. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The next day, Daniel was called into the precinct captain's office. He was bracing for more teasing about his involvement in a hospital case. Instead, he was met with a grim expression. "Burton," the captain said, leaning forward in his chair, "I just got off the phone with Internal Affairs. There's a situation." Daniel felt a bolt of adrenaline spike through him. Internal Affairs? About what? The captain exhaled. "They're reviewing a complaint filed against the department." "Looks like it concerns you." Daniel's eyes widened. "Me? What complaint?" "It was lodged by a community advocacy group on behalf of a woman named Tanya Franklin. She claims you pulled her over unfairly last month and acted with bias. She apparently has dashcam footage, she says, shows you were overly aggressive. She's also accusing you of intimidation." Daniel's heart sank. He remembered pulling over Tanya Franklin. She had been speeding significantly, but the stop had escalated when she refused to provide ID at first. He hadn't physically harmed her. He did recall tension and raised voices. And yes, she was a black woman. He racked his memory, feeling a hollow dread. Could his body language or tone have been perceived as aggressive? Possibly. The tension between them had been palpable. He'd ended up calling for backup, which likely frightened her more. At the time, he'd brushed it off as just another uncooperative driver. But now, in the light of everything with Natalie, his eyes had been opened to how his approach might come across. "Captain," Daniel said, voice tight, I'm sorry. I don't know what the footage shows, but I never used excessive force." The captain frowned, steepling his fingers. "I believe you, Burton, but this looks bad. They're pushing for an investigation. It might mean suspension, pending the outcome. Meanwhile, you'll be on administrative duty." Daniel swallowed, anxiety swirling. This was the last thing he needed. Natalie needed him, or at least needed the calm presence of someone stable in her corner. Now his career, his reputation, might be on the line. That harsh karma he'd feared, where all the dismissive or borderline biased encounters of his past might come back to haunt him, seemed to be happening. Leaving the captain's office, Daniel's mind reeled. What if he lost his job? Would that hamper his ability to help Natalie? But maybe this was his comeuppance for years of not treating everyone with the empathy they deserved. He thought of that night in the parking lot, his tears soaking the ground, and realized that change often came with pain. Determined to handle his situation with integrity, Daniel reached out to the advocacy group that had filed the complaint. He wanted to meet with Tanya Franklin and resolve this if possible. At first, they were hesitant, but after some convincing, they arranged a small meeting in a community center in one of the Nashville neighborhoods Daniel had once patrolled. When Daniel showed up in plain clothes, he was required to stay off field duty. He felt strangely vulnerable. Inside a modest meeting room with folding chairs and fluorescent lights, he found Tanya Franklin seated with two representatives from the advocacy group. She looked cautious and guarded. Daniel offered a nervous smile. "Miss Franklin, thank you for meeting me." She folded her arms, her expression cool. The advocates looked on warily. Daniel wondered if he'd be able to salvage the situation, or if it was too late. "Look," Daniel said, taking a seat, his tone sincere. "I know you feel I treated you unfairly. I want to hear your side, and I want to apologize if I crossed a line. Tanya raised an eyebrow. Why now? She asked. Because you have an internal affairs complaint on your record. Daniel bit the inside of his cheek. It's more than that, he admitted. Over the past few weeks, I've come to realize I haven't always seen people as people. Sometimes I saw them as potential threats. And I know that's not right. Tanya's posture loosened slightly, though suspicion lingered in her eyes. So you're saying you finally get it? She asked, voice tinged with bitterness. Do you have any idea how many times I've been pulled over for no good reason? How many times I've been talked down to? Daniel's throat tightened. I don't know your experience, but I do know that I might be part of the problem. I'm truly sorry. She studied him for a moment, tears brimming in her eyes, tears of anger, of exhaustion, of frustration. Finally, she nodded, seemingly moved by his genuine regret. I appreciate the apology, she said slowly, but I'm still going forward with the complaint. This system needs accountability. Daniel nodded, feeling a mix of relief and resignation. I understand. And honestly, it might be what we need to enact change. If there's footage of me being too aggressive, then I need to face it. But I do want you to know I'm trying to be different. The tension in the room eased. Tanya glanced at the advocates, who nodded slightly. Though the complaint would move forward, Daniel felt that at least on a human level, some understanding had been reached. The next steps were uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt that he was doing the right thing, confronting his own flaws, accepting the consequences, and hoping for a better future. Just as Daniel's personal and professional life seemed mired in uncertainty, a glimmer of hope sparked again for Natalie and Marcus. A week after the unsuccessful donor heart attempt, news arrived that another heart from a hospital in Kansas might be available. It belonged to a young man who had tragically died in a car accident. The mother of that donor had consented to organ donation. Natalie's text to Daniel arrived at dawn. They found another possible match. Please pray. This is it. Daniel, running on adrenaline, rushed to the hospital, ignoring the fact that he was suspended from normal duty. When he arrived, he found Natalie trembling with a mix of hope and terror. They're preparing him for surgery, she said, lips quivering. They say the initial tests show a high chance of compatibility. Daniel hugged her, tears stinging his eyes. That's amazing news, he whispered. Hours stretched by in agonizing slowness. Surgeon after surgeon filed in and out of the operating rooms. Finally, late in the evening, a doctor emerged to speak with the family. Natalie and her mother clung to each other's hands. Daniel hovered nearby, his heart pounding. The transplant is underway, the doctor said, voice steady but cautious. We've cleared the initial hurdles. The next 48 hours will be critical to see if his body accepts the organ. Relief and fear mingled in the hallway. Natalie collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing with a kind of desperate gratitude. Daniel found himself overcome by emotion. Never before had he been so personally invested in a patient's fate. Over the next 2 days, Daniel continued to hover at the hospital. He took time off well. He had little choice, given his administrative suspension, and spent it in the waiting room with Natalie, bringing coffee, food, or just quiet support. Gradually, the news improved. Marcus's body seemed to be accepting the new heart. The doctors said it was too early to be certain, but each passing hour was a victory. On the 3rd day, they finally allowed Natalie and her mother to see Marcus, though he was still unconscious and heavily monitored. The lines and beeping machines were daunting, but the rhythmic beat of his new heart was steady. Natalie turned to Daniel, tears in her eyes, voice hushed in awe. He's alive, she whispered, almost afraid to say it too loudly. Daniel felt tears burn at the corners of his eyes. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder, silent, filled with overwhelming relief. Late that night, as the hospital quieted, Daniel stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. Under the soft glow of streetlights, he found himself trembling. The tension of the past weeks was releasing, replaced by cautious joy. He thought about the chain of events that had led him here, the fateful traffic stop, the Walmart incident, the breakdowns, the revelations, the internal affairs complaint. He took a seat on the same bench where he'd found Natalie sobbing weeks before. For a moment, he bowed his head and allowed tears of relief and gratitude to flow. This was the raw, undeniable power of caring for another person's life, no matter their color, their background, or their station. He remembered something his father used to say: "We are all children under the same sky." For Officer Daniel Burton, that sky had cracked open, revealing the fragility and preciousness of every life he encountered. He would never see the world the same way again. Marcus stabilized over the following weeks. The doctors and nurses at Vanderbilt were cautiously optimistic. Natalie, her mother, and Daniel formed a little support team, taking turns at Marcus's bedside, cheering on every milestone. One morning, after Marcus had regained consciousness and could speak in whispers, he asked his sister, "Who's that guy?" glancing at Daniel. Natalie laughed through tears, hugging him gently. "That's the cop who pulled me over, the one who's been helping us. Crazy story, huh?" Marcus gave Daniel a weak smile. "Thank you," he said, his voice raspy. "Thank you for being there, for us." Daniel felt choked up. "You just focus on getting better," he managed, swallowing the lump in his throat. As the days progressed, Marcus improved, though the road to recovery was long. The community had rallied around the Williams family too. The First Baptist Church had raised enough funds to cover a portion of their mounting bills, and the hospital's financial counselors worked out a manageable payment plan. The mechanical heart was no longer necessary. The donor heart had come through. Natalie's mother arranged a leave of absence extension, thanks to a generous manager who heard of their plight. Even the Give a Heart Foundation stepped in, covering some co-pays. Meanwhile, Daniel faced his own reckoning with internal affairs. The investigation went on for months. Ultimately, the dashcam footage showed that while Daniel had been stern, there was no clear evidence of physical misconduct. However, his tone and approach were deemed unnecessarily confrontational. As a result, he received a formal reprimand and was required to undergo sensitivity training. It stung his pride, but deep down he knew it was necessary. He accepted it without resentment, understanding that this was part of his journey to become a better police officer and a better human being. Several months later, on a crisp December afternoon, Daniel parked outside a modest suburban home in Toledo, Ohio. He stepped out onto the snowy driveway, exhaling clouds of frosty breath. He glanced at the GPS on his phone to confirm the address. He wasn't on official duty. This was a personal trip, one he'd planned as a surprise. He had the next few days off, and he wanted to see how Marcus was doing after being discharged from the hospital. He knocked on the door, heart pounding. Through the frosted glass, he saw a figure approach. The door opened, revealing Natalie, her braids now styled in a neat updo, wearing a thick sweater. Her eyes widened in shock, then delight. "Officer Burton," she exclaimed, a grin lighting her face. He smiled back. "Hey, mind if I come in?" She stepped aside, pulling the door open. The cozy warmth of the home embraced him. A faint scent of cinnamon drifted from somewhere, perhaps a holiday candle. Inside, Marcus sat in the living room, still looking thin but healthy, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. When he saw Daniel, his face lit up. "No way!" he shouted, jumping to his feet, though he moved gingerly. "Dude, you made it all the way up here." Daniel laughed. "I had some vacation time. Figured I'd check on my favorite success story." Marcus shook his head, grinning from ear to ear. "Man, that's awesome." He motioned for Daniel to come in, ignoring the slight strain in his chest. "Have a seat. Mum's in the kitchen." Natalie glanced at her brother, rolling her eyes affectionately. "You sure you're okay to be up and about like that?" she teased. "I'm good," Marcus insisted, though he lowered himself carefully back into a chair. Daniel took in the sight, Marcus alive, smiling, the color returned to his cheeks, the heart that once threatened to fail now beating strong. He thought back to the frail figure in the ICU, the countless tears, and the fear. It felt surreal that he was here, in their home, witnessing the miracle of second chances. Natalie's mother came in, apron around her waist. She rushed over, embracing Daniel like an old friend. "Officer Burton, it's so good to see you. Thank you for everything." Tears shone in her eyes. Daniel patted her back gently, overwhelmed by gratitude and relief. "I'm just glad Marcus is okay." They spent the afternoon talking about the months that had passed, how Marcus's rehabilitation was going, how Natalie had enrolled in online courses while caring for her brother, how their church community in Toledo had embraced them upon their return. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the streets. Inside, warmth and laughter filled the air. Eventually, Marcus excused himself to rest. Natalie offered Daniel a seat on the sofa, handing him a mug of hot cocoa. She hesitated, then spoke softly. "I hope you know how much we appreciate you. I mean it, you changed our lives." Daniel's eyes glistened. "Meeting you changed mine," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I used to think that wearing a badge meant I had all the answers, but I was so blind. You showed me how much deeper the world's pain can be, and how important it is to see people for who they really are." She smiled, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "I'm glad something good came out of all this." They clinked their mugs in a silent toast to life, to hope, to second chances. Outside, Christmas lights sparkled along the rooftops, reflecting in the white snow like tiny beacons of wonder. In that moment, Daniel felt he had come full circle from the jaded cop who saw a nervous black woman behind the wheel and assumed the worst, to the friend who wept alongside her, fought for her brother's life, and recognized his own faults along the way. He was no saint, and he knew he had more growing to do, but he also knew that empathy had power. Caring could change the course of a person's entire life, maybe even save it. He took a sip of hot cocoa, savoring its warmth. A sense of peace settled over him. Somewhere out there, the wheels of the world kept turning and injustice still abounded. But here, in this little living room in Toledo, grace and gratitude reigned. And perhaps that was how real change began, one heart at a time. And so, a single traffic stop just 5 miles over the speed limit set in motion a chain of events that would change not only Marcus's life, but the heart of the very officer who pulled him over. In facing their biases, confronting their deepest fears, and breaking down the walls that separated them, Daniel and Natalie proved that empathy and compassion can transform even the hardest circumstances. Their bond, built in a hospital waiting room, strengthened by tearful nights and unwavering hope, became an inspiring reminder that we're all in this life together. Thank you for watching this dramatic, heartfelt story unfold. If it moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible, true-to-life stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Every click of support helps us continue bringing you real, inspiring tales that touch the soul.